product of the faith and the immigrant community joining hands. Today, all over the news, we hear about the Syrian refugees, right, and how they're fleeing all the violence that they're experiencing. What we're not hearing a lot about is the Central America crisis. We have a lot of families that are coming because of gang violence, also because of repression from their governments. And when they come, they face another challenge when they get here. So for us, it's very important to know that we have a safe space and safe cities for our families and our community to live. Right now, we hear stories, I hear stories every week of children from Central America, youth from Central America who come saying that, you know, if they didn't join a gang, if they were a boy and they didn't join a gang, then their family would be killed. Or if they're a girl and then they don't become a gang member's girlfriend, their family will suffer the consequences. So for us, it's very important to have a safe space for 13, 14-year-olds to feel like they have a home here. So this bill for us is a push to keep the xenophobic and the racist rhetoric that we keep hearing from different leaders in the country. So I hope that all of you know, as representatives of Massachusetts, actually push away from this and welcome the families that are here fleeing violence, fleeing a lot of repression in their countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Laura Wagner.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm Laura Wagner, the Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalist Mass Action Network. I'm here to echo the message that we should not support this bill. I think it's important because of the UU history with Sanctuary City, and we have such short memories that I'm going to take a moment to just give you a little context again to remind you really some more specific things about why we have sanctuary cities in the first place. The term sanctuary city is really a statement about principles. It's not about a legal definition. The term goes back, as we said, to the movement in the 1980s, led by the faith community in reaction to the violence in Central America that drove people out of their homes. With nowhere to turn, they immigrated to the US. As I go through this, you'll see a lot of parallels to today. Between 1980 and 1991, nearly 1 million Central Americans crossed the US border seeking asylum. Most were fleeing political repression and violence caused by the civil wars in Guatemala and El Salvador, and others were fleeing the 1979 revolution in Nicaragua. In El Salvador, the military, these are important numbers to remember, the military killed over 10,000 people by 1980, including Archbishop Romero, remember that, and the 4 nuns. In Guatemala, government-backed paramilitary groups killed 50,000 people and disappeared 100,000 people and perpetrated 626 village massacres. During the Reagan administration, Congress forbade foreign aid to countries committing human rights abuses. It is well documented that the US provided funds and training and arms to the Salvadoran and Guatemalan governments throughout the 70s and 80s. If the US government admitted that human rights abuses were occurring, that they were being perpetrated, then this aid would be required to cease. And the response at the time was to deem the people fleeing from Central America as economic migrants, not fleeing poverty and not governmental repression. This prevented them from seeking asylum status here in the US, and they stood a little chance of gaining legal entry. Again, a lot of parallels to today. Many Central Americans who found their way to the United States were placed in detention centers and sent home. Many of these same migrants protested this move, but claiming that they would face severe dangers upon their return. And in 1985, the ACLU had reported that they were able to document up to over 130 deported Salvadorans were in fact found disappeared, tortured, and killed. This kind of thing is happening again today. I think we should hopefully all be aware of that. The sanctuary movement began with religious communities offering physical sanctuary to asylum seekers, and soon whole communities declared themselves to be sanctuary cities that pledged to honor human lives. In Massachusetts, cities such as Cambridge and Somerville declared themselves sanctuary cities. That was back in the 80s. Some have compared the sanctuary movement to the Underground Railroad, which also offered sanctuary to people whose lives were at stake, but they had no legal recourse to fight the human rights abuses. Current human rights abuses suffered by those who seek survival in the US have prompted a renewed sanctuary movement. The First Unitarian Society of Denver became the first Unitarian Universalist congregation to house an immigrant as part of the new sanctuary movement, which was revived in 2014 in response to the current national immigration crisis. In that same year, the Unitarian Universalist Association, known as the UUA, and the United Church of Christ, UCC, declared their support of the sanctuary movement. There are many more of these now in place. Sadly, we've had to revive this movement. I just want to end by saying it's just shameful that people continue to suffer needlessly in today's world, and instead of threatening communities who have declared that they will honor human life, we should be following their example and declare sanctuary throughout the Commonwealth. Thank you. Questions?
John Thompson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I fear I will be the only one. I don't think there's anyone else on my side of the question, so, but sometimes that's the way a big movement begins. Let me say I'm speaking mostly in my own name, but I also am a member of the executive board of the Massachusetts Coalition for Immigration Reform, which we have recently begun to revitalize. We will have a website, we will become much more active, and you're going to hear our voice around here a lot in coming years. One thing I can tell you about this group is that one of our principles, number 4, is legislation to defund sanctuary cities, in quote, should be enacted on the federal level and by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that is our position. I could also say, I'll give you number 13, which is not really at stake here today. We are open to discuss a humane resolution of cases of individuals who are in the country illegally, but we feel that total unconditional amnesty is unacceptable. So we are, I would say, in the middle of it. We're not punitive, we're not seeking vengeance on anyone. What we're trying to do is help the state and the country get hold of a problem that's gone out of control. I think we're at a crossroads right now. I don't want to repeat this cliche because everyone from Obama to Trump has said the same thing, that the immigration system is broken. And there's one side is the presence of large numbers of people who are in the country illegally. There are abuses of the asylum and refugee regime. There are severe problems with the regime of legal immigration. But I would characterize them all as having this one characteristic, as there's a gap of conscious policy, of a decision of what should be done on the national level, and as a result, policy has been made de facto by, for example, with the case of those who are in the country legally, we see some people here who have very good motives, the humanitarians, but they could not exist without human traffickers, without smugglers, without paid gangs who move people in this country. They could not exist without unscrupulous employers who bring low-wage people here to drive down the wages of Americans and American workers. So I'm not here to stigmatize any one of these groups, but it's a global situation, and we have to look at it as a whole. Now, the by default policy has been made because interested parties have gained control of pieces of it. At this time, we see a general revolt, and some of the people here have called this backlash, primitive feelings by the darkest instincts in America. I would call it simply your constituents and the constituents all over the country don't like it. They see killings going on in San Francisco by the failure of a sanctuary city law. They see problems with terrorism, which are not directly, none of those, so far as I know, were directly related to those who are here illegally, but that has to do with legal immigration. It has to do with exploiting the system of sanctuary. So I think that in the next few years, we're going to get a handle on this. We're going to try to solve this as a country, and we're going to try and solve it in a humane and rational manner. And I think everyone, well, first thing is let's get control over the border. And secondly, let's agree to the principle of state and local cooperation. I was at a recent hearing, and every man in uniform, every man and woman in uniform said that's the keystone of our system, state and local cooperation. And let us adhere to the principle of majority rule, which is if we decide on a solution for this, let's not have people deciding, no, I answer to a higher law. I will not obey this law of the federal government or the state government. I have other motives that, which are holier, pure than these the primitives out there have. I think that should be rejected. So I think we're on our way. I think this is the first step, and well, Massachusetts has often taken the first step, so we're taking the step, and I hope it'll be in the right direction. I have heard, let's go on to the specific piece of legislation that's before you. I hear people talking about how illegal, people who are in the country illegally fear deportation. Well, we all know that in 2012, this administration ended deportation of anyone other than a convicted felon. So I ask the people in this room, if you belong to an immigrant advocacy organization, are you misadvising your people? Don't you tell them this? Or why do you let them fear something that is completely ungrounded? I can supply you with lots of quotes saying deportations have ended for anything other than convicted felons. That's a simple fact. So I cannot see how anyone here can seriously come in and say that that their constituents have a fear of deportation. It can only be they think you don't know, or maybe they don't know, and then in that case they're derelict in their duties to their presumed constituents. So I think this. I will agree with Mr. Roberts, and that is there is a lack of specificity in this law, and I think that would be the next step, is to define what we mean by sanctuary cities and define the specific terms under which we are going to deny funding to sanctuary cities. That it is too broad. It should be more clearly defined. No problem with that assertion. But I can cite you case after case where law enforcement officials say this person was allowed to do that because of the sanctuaries to commit a crime. I don't want to sensationalize it by bringing up the Kate Steinle, but that's probably the most sensationalized one. But the law enforcement official says we couldn't deal with this person because there was a sanctuary city law in San Francisco. Maybe we have such a law and such a recurrence of such an event will take place in this state. I hope not. So let me, I think those are my main points. I think this is we're on the way back, I believe. I believe the people outside, your constituents, who they get angry. Occasionally people stir them up, but I think there's something genuine. Their concerns about security, terrorism, loss of wages, high costs are genuine. They're not the fantasies of some dark, inhuman impulse, punitive racial hatred. That's not what's there. What's there is a genuine concern, and I hope you will show that much respect to the voters of this state and of this nation. That's what's there. And I'd like to also, let me conclude by one statement, which I found really amusing about this legislator who said, we found that there was a problem, we had to reassure the people from El Salvador that they were leaving a state where the rule of law didn't prevail. And we did, the means that we took to us to say that we will not enforce federal law, and I think it was Somerville. So I think we have a lot of contradictions, and I think this is the first step. I support this law. I'd say, please, let's consult the law enforcement officials. Do they have a serious problem with this? All of them. I'm sure I'll get a parade of law enforcement officials, just as others around the country have done. They will tell you, yeah, we'd like to be able to cooperate with the federal officials, but we're not able to do it. So with that, thank you very much, and you will be hearing from my group. Coalition, there it is up there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any
question? You have a question, Bill?
No, more of a comment. Sir, I respectfully disagree with much of what you just said. I represent the immigrant town of Boston. East Boston is the gateway neighborhood. My father came from Italy 35 years ago. Many of the folks that I represent are documented, some are not documented. But the reality is the fear of deportation is real. Many folks who have been deported from East Boston are not convicted felons. They're folks who are working very hard to make a better lives for themselves and their families, and that is not right.
Sir, could you and I exchange emails and correspondence, and we will try to inform each other factually about this?
I'm happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, pardon?
I'm happy to have a conversation.
In person or by any means? Okay.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Anyone else present here who wishes to speak on this matter? Please come forward. Did we not have you sign in there?
I think we messed up. I think we may have forgot to put my name on the list. Is that all right?
All right, okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Laura Rotolo. I'm here with the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, speaking in opposition to this bill. And before I begin, I do want to just echo Representative Madaro's comments that in fact most people deported nowadays are not in fact convicted felons, despite some policy changes encouraging a focus on criminals and on convictions. The data has not borne out as we've seen it. In fact, just in Massachusetts, just under one program called Secure Communities, half of the people deported, of over 2,000 people deported, had never committed a crime. So I want to speak very briefly in opposition to this bill, to echo the points that have already been made, but to just focus on 2 points that I think are important as well. This bill sets a trap for local governments that could cost them millions and land them in court. It asks them to choose between their budgets and public safety, between money they need for important things and the constitutional rights of their residents. I think we can all agree, no matter what side we're on, that the federal immigration system is broken, but this bill does nothing to fix it and in fact makes us all less safe. It erodes trust in police, it threatens constitutional rights, and it would open up cities and towns to liability. And that's the point that I want to focus briefly on. As we all know, federal immigration law, enforcement of federal immigration law is a federal issue. Even when cities and towns try to enforce immigration law, often those legislators that pass those bills get struck down. In 2012, a case went up to the Supreme Court. It was about Arizona's SB 1070 law that sought to create state penalties for violating federal immigration law. The Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional because federal law preempts state law in the immigration context. And what happens is that when localities try to voluntarily enforce the law, to voluntarily hold people, especially on immigration detainers, which is the key tool that immigration uses, they face liability. They're taken to court and they have to pay thousands of dollars. In our own First Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Massachusetts, of course, a recent case called Morales v. Chadbourne found that these immigration detainers are unconstitutional, that they violate the Fourth Amendment unless they are accompanied by something called probable cause, which is usually a warrant signed by a judge. We see that these detainers come down every day from immigration, asking localities to use their own resources, to put themselves on the line, to hold people on behalf of immigration. And it puts those localities in a bind. They have to either comply, to collaborate with the federal government and face potential liability, or they have to make these decisions to limit their collaboration. That's what cities and towns around the country have done. Not one of these policies has been struck down as unconstitutional or illegal because it is completely within the locality's rights to limit their voluntary collaboration, and in fact, it protects the constitutional rights of their residents. So thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Very well.
My name is Yesenia Alfaro, and there's my beautiful, handsome neighbor,
Where?
Adrian. So I'm gonna just give you a little bit of my background. I came in the 80s, as they were describing, when COMTE was the only city that was welcoming immigrants from El Salvador, and I really admire my mom, who brought 4 of her kids, which I'm one of them. And when we came here, we saw the welcome by our neighbors, and we are, like a product of, the cities that are welcoming immigrants like myself. And to tell you a little bit more is that all of us from my family, we are all contributing to this community. In most recently elections, I was elected as a school committee for District 8 in the city of Chelsea, and that's, to just show my commitment to continue to help the community, the immigrant community. And I also try to, tell the newcomers, the new kids that are coming, don't feel afraid to report any crime. Don't be afraid to go to school. Don't be afraid to go to the hospital. Immigration is not gonna apprehend you. And most recently, yesterday, I was speaking to this father from Guatemala who was deported, and then he came back, and he was afraid to go to DCF because he feels that DCF, the Department of Family, will be giving his information to INS, and then he's not gonna be reunified with his 22 months old baby. And I work at the Chelsea Collaborative too. I'm the director of organizing there, and I can tell you all the testimonies that we hear and all the things that we have to do to welcome people, to make them feel that they can report any crime to the police. And like Gladys mentioned before, that we had a great relationship with the Chief Kites, and also with other city officials, with State Representative Sadi Domenico and Danny Ryan, that they understand, and like many of you understand here, that we're not here because we don't like our country. Our country is the most wonderful, tropical. Most of you will go and love our country, but unfortunately, we can't live there. That when we come here is because we are running away from for our life. And when we come here, it's not that we come here to take the wealth of this country. It's the opposite. We are here to embrace the diversity, to embrace and continue to embrace that the United States is a land that was created by immigrants, that we are here to bring the different resources. We are here to create a community, and to continue to do that, we need your support in opposing to this bill, and so that we can continue to be the country that we are right now, and the cities that we are right now, to continue to engage our communities. Thank you for the time and for listening.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Say hi to your mom.
Is there anyone else present that would like to speak on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, we'll close this portion of the hearing. I'd like like to move that we adjourn this session. Have a second? All opposed? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we're closed, so we're then going to go into an executive session. I will hang out, we'll do that momentarily.